This conversation may cause discomfort for some people. In order to work through discomfort and center ourselves in learning, we have crafted some community guidelines that we'll be following through this conversation. Please model empathy. We are all coming from different points in all of this. We are all experts of our own experiences, so please focus your time on your own growth and learning. With that, we are all learning. It is okay not to know, and we will not judge folks for not knowing. Please be open to new ideas. Keep your comments and questions focused on the topic and growth in new knowledge. And please do not include comments that incite violence, nor use curse or vulgar words.
So let's set a definition for our discussion today. We'll be operating using the definition of racism provided by the racial equity tools. And racism is different from racial prejudice, hatred, or discrimination. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systematic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. Racism is race prejudice plus institutional and social power. Racism is a system of advantage based on race. Racism is a system of oppression based on race. And racism is a white supremacy system.
Britt, at this time, can you share with us a definition for anti-racist teaching and anti-racism?
Yeah. I think like if we could go back and discuss a little bit more about what it means to live in a racist society, because that is something as an anti-bias, anti-racist educator, we have to admit and agree that we live in a racist society, and history helps us to understand that a little bit more and helps us to understand the present. So like if we look at the GI Bill that Dr. Love referenced in the last episode, where she so accurately called it a government giveaway, it's because there was a system that supported veterans returning from war to receive low interest mortgage. Now, the language in the bill was race neutral, meaning it didn't explicitly say Black folks couldn't receive the benefits or that white folks could actually receive the benefits or not. And that's really important to understand, because this is where we start to understand the present of how did the military successfully exclude 1.2 million Black veterans from accessing the GI Bill, which is the same way if we look at after Brown versus Board of Education was passed, how did public education successfully systematically fire 38,000 Black educators in the 11 years afterwards? So if we look back at the GI Bill, we know that the military honorably discharged more Black veterans than white veterans, disqualifying them. Or we know that because that GI Bill allowed white veterans to access low interest mortgages in the suburbs, that helped to create the segregated schools in which we have today. It helped create the inequity that we have and the inequality that we have in order to access public education. And so, like, and you can read more at history.com about the GI Bill and the creation of suburbs and how all of that works and what Dr. Nolan Cabrera calls white immunity. What you didn't have to go through, you're immune to it. But living in a racist society means that based on the color of your skin, you either receive advantages or disadvantages, right? And so Julia Torres talked about the suspension rate for Black children, or how Black girls are criminalized in our schools, or how bilingualism is silenced when it comes from the brown and Black communities. That also means, though, that white learners are receiving the benefit of the doubt because of in-group bias. It means that white learners are receiving the opportunity to be enrolled in a dual language program. It means that while our Indigenous, Black, children of color are receiving the disadvantages, which is being dehumanized, our white learners are receiving advantages because of the color of their skin. So kind of going back to what Mike had said about the definition, I want us, and Courtney and I, we chatted over the weekend about this, about like really making this dynamic. And so if we can expand that definition, not just being a system advantage based on race, but it's really important that we're race conscious, right? Because if we're not, then we have that neutrality of white being the default. It's really important to expand to say that a system of advantage based on race where white folks are advantaged and folks of color and Indigenous folks are disadvantaged. So with all of that said, going back to your question about, so what is anti-racism and anti-racist teaching? I really like the definition that comes from NAC, the International Perspectives Women in Global Solidarity Group, where they say anti-racism is an active process, you're gonna hear that word active from me a lot, of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, practices, and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. It's so important to note that anti-racist means that you are committing to be active in your own analysis in all the aspects of your life, because it is counterproductive to be anti-racist in your classroom, like flip on a switch, I'm anti-racist right now, but then you go back to your neighborhood, to your community, and you perpetuate those racist actions and beliefs. So being an anti-racist teacher isn't just I'm an anti-racist teacher. I am becoming an anti-racist human being. And because I'm going to try to make some space here for Courtney, is that, so I'll just give you like 2 examples. Is that, let's see, it's important to know that you are learning how racism affects the lived experiences of people of color and Indigenous folks, particularly your students, and teaching about it, where you blame the system and not the said community. And I could like chat about that all day long, about how that inferiority and victim blaming is really prevalent in our curriculum and instruction. But also you are aggressively looking for how racism is systemic. You're looking for the power imbalance that has been part of so many foundational aspects of our classroom throughout history. And it can be manifested in individual attitudes and behaviors, as well as policies and practices. So my educators, that means that we're looking at our grading policies. We're looking at our classroom management philosophy. We're looking at our classroom celebrations and more, again, so that we can have equitable power. We're sharing resources. We are building an awareness and acknowledging that racism in fact exists, and we're working to dismantle that.